Waiting for the last people to come through the door. Thank you all so much for coming out on a rainy night like this. Even walking from a dorm room, it was a pain, I know. But I'm glad you're here. This is a very important event. My name is Reker. I'm the director of the World Heritage Museum here at Mars Hill University. And tonight you're here for a program that is going along with the exhibition, the current exhibition we have, which is called Our Story, This Place, which is an exhibition examining the history of African American education in Madison County, North Carolina. If you've not been to the exhibition, that volume went up just a little bit too much there. If you've not been to the exhibition, I strongly encourage you to do so. And I have some brochures in the back, take one, about the exhibition. We're open every day but Monday, 1 to 5, other times by appointment, and we do take group tours as well. Just give us a call or go to our website. In November, we have a program on November 13th at 6:30 in the cafeteria, in the auditorium room that's on the right side of the cafeteria as you come in, which will also go along with this exhibition, be a panel of individuals, alumni of the Anderson Rosenwald School, and which is what this exhibition, the central focus of this exhibition is about, the Mars Hill Anderson Rosenwald School. They will be there to give a presentation. There's going to be about 5 of them, 5 or 6, relating their experiences at this school, this wonderful experience they had, talk about the struggles, the hopes, the dreams, the disappointments they had growing up and going to the Anderson Rosenwald School here in Mars Hill. That school was opened between 1928 and 1965, and it closed because of integration, which we're real happy about. For those who don't know, it's the last remaining Rosenwald school in western North Carolina. All the rest have been destroyed or torn down because they're not needed anymore with that integration. But this one survives because the school district, in its wisdom, rented it out and turned it into a tobacco barn. And that's what we did in North Carolina. And so, thank goodness. And so, right now, it's being rehabilitated. There is a friends group, and there's some literature at the back if you're more interested. If you have some interest in working with that committee and raising some money, because they're rehabilitating it into a museum and a community center. And that building is on South Main Street in Mars Hill. I want to introduce our introducer tonight, if I can. First, I want to thank the planning committee, for heaven's sakes. Dorothy Rapp, chair of our planning committee, is here, and a number of other individuals from the committee are also here, Sandra and the rest. I thank you very much for your work on these programs this fall, and we're also working on doing some programs for the spring. But the person who's going to do the introducing tonight is also on that program committee, Ray Rapp, the husband of Dorothy by coincidence. But Ray came to Mars Hill University in 1977 as a member of the continuing education staff. He became the director and dean of what's now the Adult and Graduate Studies program. But he retired in 2009. He continues to teach here, and he is working with me on an upcoming exhibition in the Rural Heritage Museum that will focus on the impact of railroads on western North Carolina. We'll hope to have that open early next summer, late spring, summer. And he's an expert at that, and we're real excited about that exhibition because the railroads meant a lot to this whole region, for lumber, for minerals, and for tourism. But Ray Rapp served for 2 years as alderman of the town of Mars Hill, 3 terms as the mayor of Mars Hill, and then 5 terms as the representative of this district in the North Carolina General Assembly. And he did serve on the Appropriations Committee, and he worked on the Committee Improving Rail Service in North Carolina and the House Commerce and Drought Response Committees. And Dorothy served over 30 years as a teacher and counselor at Asheville High School and has been serving very loyally as the chair of our committee. So I want to now like to introduce and welcome Ray Rapp.
he asked me to write that, and I did, so thank you, Wes, for reading that so beautifully. Do it. Folks, tonight we're here for what is really a historic occasion. You're going to be part of history tonight because we're going to be taking part in really a reuniting and the telling of a story that has been largely untold, not only locally, not only regionally, but throughout the mountains of western North Carolina. And that is about the African American experience here in the mountains, and in particular in Madison County. And many people will say they know a little bit about the story, but they really only know a tiny, tiny piece of it. And for many years, I think the African American story has been non-existent in terms of most traditional publications. And if you talk about mountaineers, if you talk about the traditional mountain people, rarely do you see African Americans mentioned. It's in the process of change. And two of the people you're going to meet in just a few minutes are part of that change process in a remarkable way. And I do want to mention one person that's sitting in front of us who is, or sitting in the audience tonight, who is largely responsible for getting this program together all week for Founders Week, as well as tonight's program. And that's Richard Dillingham. So Richard, would you hold your hand up and get your recognition for Now what we have tonight, folks, as many of you know, we have the great-great-granddaughter of Joe Anderson, the slave who helped make the bricks for the first building on the campus here at Mars Hill, the man who was used as collateral when the founders did not have enough money to pay the Asheville builder who constructed the first building. They used Joe Anderson as collateral. He was put in jail in Buncombe County until the trustees could come up with enough money to satisfy the demands of the contractor. And that story, by the way, was not only not known at the time it occurred, but in the 20s and 30s, about every decade, the Ripley's Believe It or Not would run the story of the slave who, and this story of how Mars Hill College was founded in that particular story. And Joe Anderson, who lived to the turn of the last century, remained in this community, and his final burial place is just above us on what is known as Men's Hill, and it overlooks the campus. And he and the Anderson family, his family, descendants, direct descendants, are considered among the founding families here at Mars Hill University. But I want to mention one thing in regard to Joe Anderson, because a couple of students I had talked to about Joe Anderson a few years ago mentioned this to me as well. This institution not only owes its roots, its founding to the African American community here. This institution has had quite a history of promoting interracial relations. In the 1930s and 40s, they had ashrams here where they brought in the summertime both African American and whites here for summer conferences. And we were so remote, I guess they had no idea what was going on out here. What was going on? And under Dr. Blackwell, the Lumbee Indians were invited to come and be students here as we moved into the 1950s, and then the Cherokee Indians in the 1950s and 60s. But in 1961, one of the persons that's sitting in front of you girded her loins, because it was a monumental occasion when she agreed to step forward and be the first African American student to attend Mars Hill College. And this became the first Baptist institution to fully integrate. And at the same year that happened, in 1961, UNC Chapel Hill had enrolled on an undergraduate level its first African American student. So the two hills, Mars Hill and Chapel Hill, made history in 1961. And this historical figure I'm talking about is sitting in front of you tonight. And that's Oralene Graves Simmons. And I've been proud to know Oralene from back in the late 70s, early 80s when she was there. She is, and as I say, one of the founding members here. But the story you're going to hear tonight is, you've heard a little bit about Oralene, and let me just flesh it out. She's the mother of 5. She's had a daughter and granddaughter who now have come to Mars Hill as well and graduated, and so the family's connection with the institution continues to this day. And Oralene worked with the Asheville Parks and Recreation Program for many years, started the Martin Luther King breakfast, which has now become their 1,000 or more every year for that. And this is the woman who started that and directs that and continues on the tradition. And she is here tonight to share part of her story. And again, she is the great granddaughter of Joe Anderson, the slave who made the bricks, who was incarcerated as collateral in the founding of Mars Hill College. And sitting beside her, to join her in the dates tonight, is Suzie Anderson, who's come a long way. She's come all the way from Hawaii to be here tonight. She is the great-granddaughter of Jesse Woodson Anderson, who was the slave master who owned Joe Anderson. Now, very quickly on Suzie, she was born and raised in Walla Walla, Washington, raised next door to her grandparents who were from Bakersville, North Carolina, over in Mitchell County. And her grandfather was the grandson of Jesse Woodson Anderson, who was one of the founders of Mars Hill College, who donated the services of Joe for the construction of the first building. And for 33 years, Suzie has worked for the federal government, mostly with the Social Security Administration, and is currently a disability specialist consultant who works in the state of Hawaii where she lives. But since 2010, she's been researching her genealogy. And there's a story, and a book is being written about this story. And there's a story to be told that these two incredible, remarkable people are about to share with you, which is memorable, yes, and historical as well. So Oralene, Suzie, the podium is yours.
Our story, One Anderson, is copywritten and may not be used or reproduced in any way without special permission. I am Oralene Anderson Graves Simmons. I am One Anderson, and I wanted to know why.
I am Suzie Anderson, and I am One Anderson, and I wanted to know who. Our book, entitled Only One Anderson, is dedicated to the memory of Joe and Jesse. We are the great-great-granddaughters of a slave and a slave master. We are different Andersons, but the same one Anderson. Not only did we find each other, but we discovered how our family lines connect and how Mars Hill College continues to bridge the two Anderson families. After retiring and learning about that new TV show, Who Do You Think You Are?, I decided to research my family tree. So as far back as I can remember, I was told by my grandma Anderson that my great-great-grandfather was Jesse Woodson Anderson, a Baptist minister, a co-founder of Mars Hill College, and she also mentioned he owned a slave. My grandparents, Claude and Blanche Anderson, were both from Bakersville, North Carolina. In early 1910, they moved out west to Milton Freewater, a small town in northeastern Oregon, southeastern Washington, where they were fruit farmers. My two sisters and I grew up next door on their property. Our father was Ed Anderson, who was our grandparents' only son. Grandma always wished that we would attend Mars Hill College to honor our great-great-grandfather Jesse's legacy. This seemed like a far-fetched idea to us. We didn't know anything about the college or North Carolina. Now, 60 years later, and that's 60 years, with the help of Google and the internet, I find out the rest of the story. Jesse didn't own one slave, he owned 10. They were all family, all one Anderson. During another Google search, I read an article about Oralene Graves Simmons, Joe's great-great-granddaughter, the first African American to attend Mars Hill College. Wow, this was really interesting, and I wondered if I could ever get a chance to talk to her, or if she was even still alive. And if I could get a chance to talk to her, what was I going to say? Will she even talk to me? All this history was so exciting that I couldn't get enough. Early one morning, I received a return call from Richard Dillingham, a long-lost cousin from Mars Hill, telling me I was the first Anderson to ever contact him from Jesse's family. We had a nice conversation, and he shared Oralene's contact information with me. So I got my nerve up. I made that call. After a few voice messages, we finally connected, and she returned my call.
I got this call from a woman in Hawaii, a complete stranger.
I asked her if she knew a Jesse Woodson Anderson.
Thinking it was just another reporter or writer looking for information for a good story, I was quick to ask her, "What about him?"
I told her that my name was Suzie Anderson and that my great-great-grandfather was Jesse Woodson Anderson, who was your great-great-grandfather Joe Anderson's slave master. There it was, it popped right out of my mouth, and I begged her to not hang up the phone.
I found myself catching onto the kitchen sink to settle myself. As I asked the caller, "Would you please repeat that?" Her words echoed in my ears as she repeated it. And it took me all the way back to when I was 7 years old. And I learned that my great-great-grandfather Joe really was a slave. I later learned that history books and archival documents told the story of how the first college trustees had underestimated construction costs. And when the contractor asked for the final payment of $1,000, they found themselves embarrassed. A lien was placed on the building, and the sheriff came to serve it. The contractor noticed the young black slave by the name of Joe, who belonged to Jesse Woodson Anderson, who was molding the bricks for the school. The contractor and the sheriff decided that Joe, who was considered the best brick mason in 3 counties, would serve as collateral. Joe was chained, handcuffed, and led away to the Bunker County Jail in Asheville. I wondered, who were these Andersons and why slavery? If the money owed was not paid back within 5 days, Joe would be sold at the auction block to the highest bidder. Fortunately for Joe, his family, and Mars Hill, the money was raised to pay off the debt. After the Civil War came freedom for Joe Anderson's family and their future. His former slave master, Jesse Woodson Anderson, gave him property to live on. Joe's life was productive until he passed away in early 1900s. He was buried in our family plot, and in 1930, his remains were taken home to the Mars Hill College campus, where a marker still remains. Growing up in my grandmother, Effie Anderson's home in Mars Hill, I realized injustice at a very early age. Every day I got up early to board that bus that would take me to the Anderson Rosewall School for colored children. My grandmother, Effie Anderson, has served as the first teacher at this school. But on my way, I just had to take the shortcut through the Mars Hill College campus. I would look up at the big tall buildings, turn around and say, "This is where I'm going to college." Now, why did I say that? Why did I even think it? I didn't ever see any African American students walking across this campus with books. Just maids, cooks, janitors, and others cutting grass. It was my little dream. Later, when I attended Stevensley High School, my classmates always talked about the college that they wanted to attend. I always passed on the matter, keeping my little dream a secret to myself. And then finally one day I announced, "I'm going to Mars Hill College." They looked at me real funny and said, "Where?" "Mars Hill College," I said. They laughed and said, "That's that white college out there in that little town where she comes from. Who does she think she is?" "I'm Joe Anderson's great-great-granddaughter. I'm graduating with honors, and I will show you one day," I said to myself. In April of 1961, I completed an application to become a student at Mars Hill College, and then I waited for a reply. I waited and I waited and I waited for that reply. Finally came a letter from Mars Hill College. I was so excited, I tore open the letter and it stated, "We are not accepting any applications at this time." And something about reapplying again next year if you're interested. That was the disappointment of my dream. But I did think about the civil rights movement and the conditions of the South. Churches being bombed, buses burned, feelings about African Americans entering all-white institutions ran high throughout the South. My classmates were going away to schools in the eastern part of the state. Now I can just go away with them and all this pressure would be behind me of being a first. But I did find out as late as June that other students were being accepted at Mars Hill College. I got the picture. I got the whole picture. I only had to look in the mirror. An appeal was made to the Board of Trustees on my behalf by Reverend Dr. Robert Seymour of Chapel Hill. A new decision was made. Yes, they would accept my application. My story received local, national attention, and also from Times Magazine. As a student of Mars Hill College, I learned the stark realities between the slave buried on the hill above the campus who was hailed as a hero, and me, the student who suffered the indignities, the threats, and the harassment of being told, "You don't belong here because of the color of your skin." But I held on to the thought of just be strong and remember why you are here. I returned home, still not knowing who the other Andersons were. I did some research, but learned very little. and did not find the answer why. Now let's go back to that telephone conversation. We left and I was hanging on to the kitchen sink to steady myself. She said,
Please don't hang up the phone. I've been on a national search for you. I hope my grandfather was not mean to your grandfather.
I told her how Jesse had lost all of his possessions after the Confederate War, and he gave Joe the slave his farm. Jesse moved to an apartment in Asheville. Jesse and Joe had a certain kinship that was priceless, as Joe cared for him until his death. Maybe one day we will find out why. Suzie came forward with the words of apologies for the indignities that my family had suffered because of slavery and segregation. It was all that I ever wanted to hear, was for someone to say, I am sorry, I apologize, please forgive me. We promised each other that we would stay in touch. I hung up the phone and the tears just started falling on the floor. I cried all the emotions that had been pent up inside of me for years. I had wanted someone from the Jesse Woodson Anderson family to say those words. I had attended the Founders Day banquet, always looking for someone from Suzie's family. I wanted to sit down at the table across from them. I didn't know what I was going to say, but I wanted to have that conversation anyway. Suzie and I became friends through our phone calls and our emails. She decided to visit me in North Carolina, and we researched our family histories together. We put together files and documents and placed them on our trees until we found out those trees crossed. Suzie said with an excitement,
We are cousins. I knew it. You're my little cousin from North Carolina. And I planted a big kiss on her cheek.
I had someone to go with me to the Founders Day banquet. We sat together, the descendants of the slave owner and the descendants of the slave.
And we continue our relationship today, each realizing that there are still so many unanswered questions of why and how. As we research together, we're looking for those answers. When we tell people about our story, many suggest that we should write a book. But we even want a movie, too. We know that so many stories have been written about the Andersons, even an appearance in Ripley's Believe It or Not. Dare we write a book for children, telling them about our search for each other? The book is filled with stories and adventures, and some stories made us cry, while others made us laugh and laugh and laugh. Our bond continues to bring us closer as one Anderson, realizing our similarities. We continue to reach out to other Anderson descendants and ask, please join us as one Anderson. The book is scheduled to be released in October 2015 for Founders Day next year. A portion of the proceeds from the sale of our book will help establish the Joseph Anderson Endowment so that his descendants can attend at Mars Hill University. We are the great-great-granddaughters, one Anderson.
I want people to take away from this presentation that Joe Anderson was real, not 3/5 of a human being, not just a slave buried on the hill, not old Black Joe, but a skilled brick maker, an educator who helped establish a school for African American students.
I also want people to take away from this presentation that Jesse Woodson Anderson was a strong advocate. Back in 1890, during one of the trustee meetings, when the school was facing closure, he was one of the strongest opponents and advocate. He became the chief fundraiser, encouraging higher education for people in this area.
And because of this, my daughter, Namura Blakely, graduated from Mars Hill University. And further, my granddaughter, Shamia Terry, graduated from Mars Hill University. Thank you for taking time to listen to our story, One Anderson. We will answer questions.
Any questions?
You're scared to
Oh,
death.
there's a question.
Yes. Excuse me? Where did the tree cross? Between the two Andersons?
One of Jesse's brothers, there was a marriage in the family on that side, so we found that we were really like double cousins.
And also did the DNA Ancestry.com,
Ancestry.com,
23andMe.
Ireland, here we go.
And we have another Anderson cousin here, Richard,
Yeah, Richard Dillingham.
owns us as one Anderson.
There's a lot.
Yes, if you're one Anderson, raise your hand. If you're one Anderson.
Well, we'll look on the tree, maybe there's more. Okay, I think somebody in the back.
Yes.
Who did he marry on his side? I didn't get it.
Who did he marry?
Cross. Who married him?
I don't think in that time they could marry.
Well, then who begat who?
Who begat who? A nannies and servants, and at this time we're not naming any names because it's in the book, One Anderson. The book will be on sale October 2015.
Yeah, we are too.
Yes, Richard?
Do you have any idea who might play the parts in the movie?
Yes, we do. Denzel Washington will play Joseph Anderson. And who's playing?
Okay, we've had a couple of names for Jesse.
Yes.
Robert Duvall or Kevin Costner.
Yes. Yes.
How did you first hear of the story of Joe Anderson? Where was it recorded? You mentioned some documents about that.
Sure. I lived here in Mars Hill. I was born in Mars Hill. Lived in the home of my grandmother, Effie Anderson. And one day after school, she told us not to change our clothes, that she was taking us here to the amphitheater to see the play. I saw the play there for the first time about Joe Anderson, and didn't quite understand what all was going on with this white student with his face painted black, and somebody with paper chains, and another student leading him off stage. And so I asked my grandmother, and she told me about the story. And Founders Day continued to be celebrated here every year, and they would continue to do the play or some other kind of celebration. So it was something that I grew up knowing, as most other people here in this area did, and knew that he was buried here on campus and could go to the grave site to visit.
Yes, sir.
So it's a great story, wonderful. So certainly brilliant.
And
has your story encouraged other people of similar backgrounds to contact you?
To contact us.
Yeah, you opened up discussions in other parts of the country or...
Well, we certainly hope to, and I hope that you have one of our brochures. Did you get one of our brochures when you came in? Yes, we all received some invitations even today. I think this is what our third time telling the story.
Third time
Telling the story today, and yes, people have received it well, and are asking us for presentations while we are putting together the book.
This week is the first time they publicly told their story.
And we met in 2011, so we're real fresh. Took 60 years, don't forget. Now you know our ages.
Yes. Yes. I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
I said, you mentioned a play
Yes.
that usually is around Founders Day.
Yes.
So does the university put on this play?
The university is not putting on the play at this time, but it has in many years past, and there was even one entitled Bricks, correct me if I'm wrong, Richard, that has already, that has been done in the past. But you must remember that so many other things have taken place since those two plays were written and produced. And every time Suzie and I are together, we document all the things that we experience, and it will become a part of the book. Even this gathering tonight will be a part of it.
Yeah, may I mention too, there was in 1981, I believe it was, a short video that was made, a movie entitled Bonded. And that is available, and you can see that in the exhibit at the Rural Heritage Museum. That is available to be seen. It runs about, Richard, 12 minutes is what it was. So if you'd like to see that, it tells the story of Joe Anderson, and it was written from the original play itself.
Yes. Yes.
I'm always curious to know, people have different reactions to things. So what qualities kind of about where you were with your own kind of self-identity allowed you to be so open to discussing the idea of how your trees crossed and your previous past and being open to this experience?
Thank you so much for asking that, and I really appreciate it. And I must say that I feel that I have grown and I have matured an awful lot from being a little girl and knowing about the story, knowing that growing up in a segregated society, being able to go to school here, suffering discrimination, being angry, being depressed, sometimes feeling entitled. Times I wanted to go away and didn't ever want to hear the name Mars Hill anymore, never wanted to come back home. Then being embraced by certain people, building bridges and building roads back, and all at the same time maturing. Also knowing that I wanted to give my children a great education and sending them away to colleges and universities, and then having one child on her own choose to be a student here at Mars Hill. I had to turn that around, and I even came back. I even came back and became a student at Mars Hill at a later time and studied recreation with Ray Rapp. I was able to do that, and I would say since 2011, Suzie has been a great help to me in helping to know and to realize who I am, and helping me to bridge that gap. Doing DNA, I have come a long way, and yes, I can speak and I can talk about it at this time. Yes.
After 1961, when you were the first African American attended, do you have any idea what the percentage, or I guess you have a percentage of African Americans that were accepted here in Marcel after your first year?
Do I have any idea how many African Americans were accepted after I was here at Mars Hill? No, I do not. Are you talking about year by year?
Yes, no,
Just in general.
How many people came year by year after I did?
right, like if there was an increase at all in the attendance by African Americans?
Yes, I think it slowly grew. It was slow. I think maybe it was like a year or two after I left before anyone came. But then it was like 1, 2, 3, 4, and it continued to increase. And I am very proud of the number of African American students that are here at Mars Hill today. And I must admit that every time I'm here on campus and I see African American students that I pass, it makes my heart.
Mine too.
Yeah. Yeah. Of course, they don't know why I look at them a little crazy or what, you know.
That's what we're here for.
Yeah. And they don't know who I am, but you know, that little look. Yes.
It appears that you were the person who spent some time here, most of your time here in Rossville, and you went away to get back. But the fact that you live in Hawaii, I was wondering if you spent any kind of time here in Mars Hill, or was it so this story is new to you?
Oh, it's very new.
Since 2011, but now since this has happened, did you ever have any curiosity or?
Well, that's how I found out. And we never had been to North Carolina. We couldn't figure out why our relatives moved away, why they never came back, why we didn't know anybody from North Carolina. And then after working 33 years, and I finally had some time, and I met a lady from Chapel Hill that was doing her family tree, and she told me about the Who Do You Think You Are show. So I watched it, and I thought, wow, that's cool. So then I started Ancestry.com, and because I knew from Jessie, I didn't know how far back or how far this way, but I knew from Jessie working down. And I found a family tree that my father had started, and my stepmom gave me the tree paperwork back in 2006, and I'm so sad I never looked at it until I retired and had time and met this girl in 2010. So then in 2011, it took me that long to find her from 2010 to about the middle of 2011, and started contacting her. And then Richard had articles from the Hilltop magazine, and I started finding things like that and writing people that said, is there any way that I could ever find out where Oralene Simmons is? Does she live in North Carolina? Is she still alive? And I mean, because I wanted to talk to her, because it was such a big deal to think that she was the first descendant of Joe to get to go to college here, and then, of course, being the first African American. It was such a story. It gave me goosebumps. Nobody ever told us. We lived in Oregon and Washington growing up. Had no idea until just 2010 or 11, I found all this out. So it was amazing. We're new.
So have you guys decided to write a book? Do you sort of have like a psychologist in the program to sort of help you move through this?
Yes.
Because
Yes.
And it's like the heaviness, it may be balanced or it may be imbalanced.
Yes, we do have people who are helping us to work through it, and we are working from outlines. I've done a couple of chapters.
Is it my understanding that your book will be primarily for children and young adults?
Yes, it will be for young
The
adults.
first one.
The first one.
We have a long continuing second part.
It's as if the more we research, the more information we find, there's that much more that can be found. It is a never-ending thing when you start researching family trees, marriage records, census reports. You continue to pick up new and different names, and you start on another branch, and it continues to grow. One thing that we have really enjoyed is the stories that we have read. There's a number of books that have been published in connection with our families' lives and adventures, and they're fascinating stories in there, and as we have said, stories that have made us cry, some that make us laugh, some we don't really understand. One thing, I'll share this one thing with you. We were looking at census records and tracing down names of certain family members, and we found where there were 2 little black children in the home with a white man listed on the census records. And we wanted to know, why are there 2 little children living with this white man and there's nobody else there? And I remember I found myself consoling Suzie, because you find things like that. And so that prompted us to continue to look ahead to the next century, when the next census record was available, to see if these children were still in that same household. Were they in the household with somebody else? And then tracing them on down, do you find out where they became adults? Did they get married? How many children did they have? It takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of work, a lot of dedication, but those are some of the things that we find in our research.
Have y'all been having to do all this research apart? I know you said you came to North Carolina for a little bit, but how much work was done when y'all were together, and how much work has been done with you in Hawaii and you?
Okay. Well, we joined 4 genealogy societies. We go to every genealogy library, college library, Appalachian library, and she works a lot of it here because she's local and can find things. Me, I'm mostly internet, being so far away, but I come every year so we can get some time together. She came to Hawaii in 2012, and of course we just had fun for that trip. But I don't even think we studied during that.
Not very much, a lot of play.
So we do things like that, and and every time she finds something, she calls me or writes me. If I dig up a little bit more, then I call her or write her.
And then there are sometimes I find something that just depresses me so much. I will call Suzie crying about it. I'm telling her, I found this will where my aunt and her children were sold. The family was split because one person got this one, another person got that one, and somebody else got that one. And these are my family members. And this is what happened to them. And so I would cry to Suzie, and then she would say, well, at least nobody in your family murdered somebody like in my family.
Or as my little sister says, well, at least we didn't shoot anybody.
But I have I have invested a lot of money in books, and so has Susie. Yeah,
Lots of books.
Yeah, you bought lots and lots of books as we continue to check and to cross, and to research, so as much can be factual as possible. Thank you, Ray.
Ladies and gentlemen, please do not leave. There is something about to happen that I think you'll be very interested in, and if our guests of honor will just stay up here, there's the NAACP group from the campus has their own special program.
Oh, that's nice.
You may write me down history with your twisted bitter eyes. You may tread me in the very dirt, but still like this, I'll rise. Does my sexiness offend you? Why are you beset with women? Cause I walk like I've got old wings pumping in my living room.
Just like winds and like sides, with certainty of tides, just like hopes springing high, still I rise.
Did you want to see me broken? Bowed head and lowered eyes, shoulders falling down like teardrops, weakened by my soulful cries.
Does my haughtiness offend you? Don't be taken off full heart, cause I laugh like I've got gold mines digging in my backyard.
You may shoot me with your words, you may cut me with your eyes, you may fool me with your unfaithfulness, but still like there are rise.
Does my sexiness upset you? Does it come as a surprise that I dance like I've got diamonds at the meeting of my thighs?
Out of the cuts of history's shame, I rise up from the past of rooted pains. I rise.
I'm a black ocean, leaping and wide, welling and swelling, I bear the tide. Leaving behind nights of terror and fear, I rise.
Into a daybreak that's wondrously clear, I rise. Bringing the gifts of my ancestors, I am the hope and the dream of the slave. I rise.
I rise, I rise.
Thank you. Those were the inspirational words by the timeless Maya Angelou. I'm Kenny Anderson, and we are the members of the MHU NAACP. And we wanted to take this opportunity to share our appreciation for you, Mrs. Simmons. We have been able to form a college chapter of the NAACP here on this campus, but recognize that without your contribution and the contributions of those who have come before us, this would not be possible. So, to thank you, our chapter would like to plant a beautiful flowering cherry tree on our campus in your honor. This tree will symbolize the invaluable impact that you have had on this university. And may it be a continual reminder that no matter how cold the winter, no matter how harsh the storm, that we should stand tall and continue to blossom and grow, just as you did, Mrs. Simmons, years ago. Our chapter would like to invite you back to this campus soon for the planting of this tree. Thank you.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, and good night.